Ethan woke up to the sharp screech of metal scraping against concrete, followed by a chorus of voices, laughter, and the unmistakable sound of an inflatable pump. His head pounded as he blinked at the early morning sunlight streaming through his blinds. What the hell was that noise? Groggy, he swung his legs over the bed, grabbed a shirt, and stumbled toward the window. What he saw made his stomach drop. His backyard, his private backyard, had been completely taken over. Lawn chairs were unfolding in neat little rows, picnic baskets were being unpacked onto makeshift tables, and an entire inflatable swan float was being set up near the lake. Coolers clanked, people in obnoxious floral shirts laughed as they lugged speakers across the grass, and an HOA banner had been draped across the fence, his fence. At the center of it all, barking orders like a queen directing her subjects, stood Karen. Ethan clenched his jaw as he stepped outside. Karen's perfectly manicured fingers waved in his direction, her smug expression barely containing her glee. "Morning, Ethan," she chirped as if this were some casual neighborhood gathering and not a full-blown invasion of his private property. "Isn't it a beautiful day for a community get-together? We thought the lake would be the perfect spot." Ethan ran a hand over his face, forcing himself to breathe. "Karen," he said evenly, "what the hell are you doing?" Karen had the audacity to look surprised, as if she genuinely didn't understand why he might be upset. She let out a light, insincere laugh. "Oh, Ethan, come on. This lake is right here, and honestly, it's kind of selfish to keep it all to yourself, don't you think?" Ethan's patience snapped like a dry twig. "Karen, this is my land. My lake. Not public property. Not part of the HOA. You have no right to be here." Karen's smile wavered, just for a second, before she plastered it back on. "We're all neighbors, Ethan. As part of the community, we should all be able to enjoy it. Honestly, I don't know why you insist on being so antisocial." A man in a blindingly bright Hawaiian shirt brushed past Ethan, hauling a massive speaker toward the lake. "Where can I plug this in, dude?" "Oh, hell no." Ethan stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "You're not plugging in anything. You're leaving." Karen sighed, rolling her eyes dramatically as if he was being unreasonable. "Ethan, don't make a big deal out of this. It's one afternoon. You weren't even using it." Ethan pointed at the gate, his voice dangerously low. "Get out. Now." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Karen's face twisted into a scowl. "You're being incredibly selfish," she spat. "Look at this place. It's right here, and you want to hoard it all for yourself? That's just—" "If I wanted to hoard it," Ethan interrupted coldly, "I wouldn't have paid for it." Karen's expression darkened, but before she could open her mouth again, Ethan pulled out his phone. "Leave before I call the cops." That got their attention. The man with the cooler hesitated, taking a step back. A few HOA members suddenly found reasons to inch toward the exit. But Karen never backed down. She stood her ground, her lips curling in fury. "This isn't over," she hissed. Then, with an exaggerated flip of her hair, she stormed off, her little army grumbling and packing up their things. Ethan stood there, arms crossed, watching until the last person was gone. Finally, he let out a long exhale. Unbelievable. But deep down, he knew, this was just the beginning. The next morning, Ethan found a pile of garbage just outside his fence, empty soda cans, fast food wrappers, and an entire pizza box flipped upside down like someone had deliberately dumped it there. He gritted his teeth. This wasn't some random accident. This was a message. By the end of the week, the pattern was obvious. HOA members were taking their evening walks exclusively past his house, glaring at him as if he were some neighborhood pariah. More trash appeared, this time, directly at his gate. A white sedan, which he recognized as Tom from the HOA, suddenly developed a habit of accidentally parking half in his driveway. The message was clear: they wanted to make his life miserable. Then, the letters started coming. Neatly printed on HOA letterhead, the first envelope looked official. Ethan flipped it open, already rolling his eyes. Notice of violation: your fence is unsightly and must be repainted in compliance with community standards. He laughed, shaking his head. The HOA had zero authority over his property, and Karen knew it. Still, the letters kept coming. Your lawn is not maintained at an acceptable level. The lake presents a safety hazard and must have proper signage allowing access. By the fifth one, Ethan was more amused than angry. This was so desperate, so unbelievably petty, that he almost admired Karen's commitment to the act. Almost. But amusement turned to pure rage when he received the lawsuit notice. The HOA, led by Karen, had filed a formal complaint, claiming that Ethan's fence and lake encroached on community land. She had even attached a doctored property survey, trying to make it look like his lake was part of the neighborhood's shared amenities. Ethan clenched the letter so hard his knuckles turned white. This wasn't just some petty feud anymore. This was war. He called his lawyer, Dan Carter, who read through the case in silence before letting out a sharp laugh. They forged a survey? Wow. This is next-level stupid. The day of the hearing, Karen walked into court like she had already won. She was dressed in pristine white, her posture perfect, and her smug little smirk firmly in place. She launched into her performance, voice trembling with manufactured concern. Your Honor, we're simply trying to protect the integrity of our community. It's deeply unfair that Ethan has taken such a valuable resource for himself while the rest of the neighborhood suffers. Ethan remained silent, watching. Let her dig her own grave. Karen's lawyer, a sleazy-looking man in an ill-fitting suit, continued. As you can see from the attached survey, the lake clearly falls within the HOA's jurisdiction. Mr. Taylor. Dan cut in smoothly. Your Honor, that document is fraudulent. Karen's smirk flickered. Dan placed a stack of papers on the judge's desk, including the real property deed, city zoning records, and the official boundary survey. Silence. The judge flipped through the documents, eyes narrowing. Dan folded his arms. Not only does my client's deed prove that the lake is entirely private property, but we can also provide evidence that the survey submitted by the HOA was altered. Karen's lawyer went pale. Karen, however, was still trying to fake her confidence. Well, Your Honor, she said sweetly, I'm sure we can all agree that, regardless of legal technicalities, it's morally wrong for one person to control such a precious natural resource. The judge didn't even glance at her. The case is dismissed. The defendant's property lines are clear. Karen stiffened. The judge, clearly unimpressed, turned his gaze toward her. Additionally, the plaintiff is fined for filing fraudulent claims in court. Ethan watched as Karen's mask of smug superiority shattered. Her mouth opened and closed as if she wanted to argue, but her lawyer had already slumped in defeat. The gavel slammed down. Ethan stood, adjusting his jacket with a satisfied smirk. Tough break, Karen. Her expression was pure fury. She stalked past him, whispering just loud enough for him to hear. You'll regret this. Ethan believed her. And he was right to. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the deep, bass-heavy thump of music vibrating through his walls. The sound was so loud it shook his windows, and when he rushed outside, his stomach dropped. They were back. Karen and a group of at least 20 people were spread out along the shoreline of his lake, coolers cracked open, kids splashing in the water, and, of course, Karen herself lounging in a beach chair like a queen surveying her kingdom. A massive Bluetooth speaker sat beside her, blasting some obnoxious pop song at full volume. She lifted her sunglasses as she saw him approach and flashed him a triumphant smirk. "Oh, Ethan. I knew you'd come around." She gestured at the chaos behind her. "See? Isn't it nice to share?" Ethan clenched his fists. "Get off my property. Now." Karen sighed, shaking her head in exaggerated disappointment. "You really need to learn how to relax. It's just for today. We'll be gone by sunset." Ethan pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the cops." That's when Karen's smirk widened. "Oh, don't worry," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "I already did." Ethan froze. "You, what?" She stood, brushing invisible dust off her ridiculous sundress. "I told them you were being aggressive and threatening us." "I mean, really, Ethan, it's your word against mine, and considering how you're always so hot-tempered," she trailed off, her smirk deepening. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Before he could respond, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. His jaw tightened as he saw two police cruisers pulling up to the curb. Neighbors had already started gathering on their porches, peeking from behind curtains, pretending to check their mail, because nothing got a suburban neighborhood's attention like a police confrontation. The moment the officers stepped out, Karen went full performance mode. "Officers! Thank God you're here," she gasped, clutching her chest like she'd just survived some horrific ordeal. "He's been screaming at us, making threats, trying to force us off the lake. We were just having a peaceful afternoon, and now we're terrified." Ethan wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but he knew better. He kept his expression calm as the older officer turned to him. "Sir, is this true?" "No," Ethan said evenly. "This lake is on my private property. These people are trespassing." Karen let out an exaggerated gasp, like he'd just said the most ridiculous thing in the world. "Oh, come on. That's not true. This lake belongs to the community." The officer frowned. "Do you have proof?" Without missing a beat, Ethan scrolled through his phone, pulling up his property deed. He held it out, letting the officer see the official boundary lines. The officer studied it, then handed it to his partner, who nodded. The older cop sighed, rubbing his temple. "Ma'am, this lake is private property. You and your guests are trespassing." Karen's face went sheet white for a fraction of a second before she quickly recovered, flipping her hair back. I didn't know that," she stammered, for the first time actually looking nervous. "I just thought." The officer folded his arms. "Well, now you do. And you also falsely reported a crime. That's a serious offense." Karen's eyes darted to Ethan, and for the first time, he saw genuine panic. He was being aggressive," she tried again, but the words sounded weak even to herself. Ethan sighed dramatically. "I have security cameras that recorded everything," he said casually. "Would you like to see the footage, officer?" Karen snapped her head toward him, her eyes wild with panic. That was the final nail in the coffin. The officers exchanged glances before the older one shook his head. "That won't be necessary," he said, giving Karen a pointed look. "We've seen enough." Karen's entire body stiffened. The cop turned back to Ethan. "Would you like to press charges for trespassing?" Karen's head whipped toward him so fast it was a miracle she didn't get whiplash. "What? No. Come on, Ethan, be reasonable." Ethan considered it. Watching her squirm was deeply satisfying, but pressing charges would be too easy. No, he wanted something worse. "I won't press charges," he said slowly. Karen visibly relaxed, for half a second. "But," Ethan continued, smirking, "I am filing a restraining order against her." Karen screeched like a dying bird. "A restraining order? That's insane. You can't." The officer ignored her and nodded. "That's well within your rights. I'd recommend getting an attorney to file the paperwork immediately. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The cop turned back to her and the dwindling crowd of HOA members. You all need to leave this property now. Or we will start making arrests. The HOA members scrambled to pack up their things, mumbling apologies and avoiding eye contact as they hurried off Ethan's land. Karen, however, lingered, her face twisted in pure fury. Her voice trembled with barely restrained rage. This isn't over, Ethan. Ethan gave her a slow, satisfied smile. Oh, Karen, he said smoothly, it really is. The cops waited until the last person was gone before turning back to him. Sorry for the trouble, sir. Let us know if she or anyone else comes back. Ethan shook their hands. Will do. Thanks for coming. The police cars pulled away, and as the last of the chaos faded into silence, Ethan exhaled, finally feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. But he wasn't done yet. Karen had crossed the line for the last time, and if she thought she could get away with it, she had another thing coming. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Ethan had dealt with enough of Karen's antics to know she wouldn't just accept defeat. She was too arrogant, too vindictive to let things go. And sure enough, her next move came in the form of a thick, official-looking envelope taped to his front door. He tore it open and nearly choked on his coffee. Inside was a notice of violation from the HOA, stating that his fence, his lawn, and even his lake were in direct violation of community standards. The letter claimed he was being fined thousands of dollars unless he either removed the fence, allowed public access to the lake, or paid up immediately. Ethan laughed out loud. The audacity. Karen was still trying to play this ridiculous game, despite knowing full well the HOA had zero authority over his property. But something about the letter felt off. The fine was outrageously high, even for Karen's standards. His gut told him there was more to this than just another power play. He called his lawyer, Dan Carter, and by the time Ethan finished reading the letter over the phone, Dan was already chuckling. This is illegal as hell, Dan said. But let's make this interesting. Meaning? Meaning, we're not just going to shut this down, we're going to dig. Dan had connections, and within a day, they had dug deep into the HOA's financial records. What they found was worse than either of them expected. For years, the HOA, under Karen's leadership, had been collecting fees from homeowners who weren't legally obligated to pay them. They had been issuing fake violations, demanding money for community upkeep, and, worst of all, Karen had been siphoning funds into a personal offshore bank account. She was stealing from the neighborhood. Ethan couldn't believe how deep the corruption ran. This wasn't just Karen being a petty control freak, this was outright embezzlement. Damn, Ethan muttered, staring at the reports. We've got her. Oh, we've got her, Dan agreed. And when this hits the neighborhood, she's going to lose everything. Ethan grinned. Let's blow it up. The next morning, a formal lawsuit was filed against the HOA, not just for harassment, but for fraud, embezzlement, and attempted property theft. Ethan made sure the entire neighborhood knew. It didn't take long before HOA members started turning on Karen. The same people who had blindly followed her now wanted blood. Some were furious about the illegal fines, others were furious about their money disappearing, but all of them wanted Karen gone. When Karen finally found out what Ethan had done, she lost it. She showed up at his gate, red-faced, screaming like a banshee, her voice shrill enough to set off car alarms. You can't do this to me, she shrieked, slamming her fists against the metal bars. This is my community. I built this place. You have no idea who you're messing with. Ethan didn't even bother responding. He just stood on his porch, sipping his coffee, watching her meltdown with pure amusement. Eventually, Karen stormed off, but Ethan could tell this was hitting her hard. For years, she had built her empire on lies, intimidation, and control. And now? The walls were closing in. But the final blow was still coming. The lawsuit moved fast, faster than Karen had anticipated, because the evidence against her was overwhelming. When the case was finally heard in court, it wasn't even a fair fight. Karen sat stiffly at the defendant's table, her pristine white suit looking a little less crisp, her smug demeanor completely shattered. The judge took one look at the financial records and didn't even let her finish her defense before ruling. The HOA was officially dissolved. Karen? She was personally fined for misusing community funds. But the real kicker? Because of the fraudulent fines, she was held financially liable for tens of thousands of dollars in damages. Ethan watched her expression carefully as the reality sank in. Her house, once the picture-perfect embodiment of HOA-approved aesthetics, was about to go into foreclosure. Her car? Repossessed. She had to sell everything just to pay off the people she had wronged. And Ethan? He made damn sure to enjoy every second of her downfall. The day Karen finally left the neighborhood, Ethan stood on his porch, watching with the same satisfaction one might feel after stomping out the last embers of a dying fire. A beat-up U-Haul sat in her driveway, stuffed with boxes, mismatched furniture, and whatever was left of her once pristine life. She moved with stiff, jerky motions, her usual air of superiority replaced by something brittle, something broken. Her home, the crown jewel of her self-appointed empire, had been seized by the bank. Her luxury SUV, once a rolling monument to her fake authority, had been hauled away on a tow truck weeks earlier. She had spent years making everyone else's life a nightmare, and now, she was living in one herself. For a moment, she hesitated, glancing toward Ethan. Their eyes met, and he could see the rage still simmering beneath her carefully controlled expression. For so long, she had been untouchable, dictating how others lived, lording her position over them. Now, she had nothing. But she wasn't about to beg. Karen was too proud for that. Instead, she sneered, her lips curling with the last shreds of defiance she had left. But whatever she had planned to say, whatever final jab she had loaded in her throat, died there. Without a word, she climbed into the truck, slammed the door, and drove away, leaving behind the ruins of her kingdom. Ethan didn't celebrate immediately. He let the silence sit for a while, savoring the knowledge that Karen was gone for good. But later that evening, he did exactly what he had promised himself he would do. He threw the biggest lake party the neighborhood had ever seen. The invitations had gone out to every single non-HOA resident, each one signed with a personal note that read, "Now that the tyrant is gone, let's enjoy our freedom." And the people showed up in droves. Coolers lined the grass, music pulsed through the air, and for the first time in years, the lake was filled with laughter, not conflict. Standing by the water, Ethan let the moment sink in. Karen had tried to steal his land, his peace, and his rights, but in the end, the only thing she had successfully stolen was her own future. As the party roared on, a thought crossed his mind, one he knew would make for an interesting discussion later. Have you ever felt powerless against HOA, or a Karen, abusing their authority? Share your experiences below, let's see who had it worse.